My name's Kemi Da Silva-Ibru. I'm the founder of WARIF, the Women at Risk International Foundation. And this is an organization that was established in response to the prevalence of rape, sexual violence, and trafficking of young girls and women across communities in Nigeria. We've been working in the gender-based violence space for almost 4 years now. We were established in 2016. And essentially, our goal was very simple. How do we create a survivor-centered approach in addressing this issue? How do we put the survivor front and center? How do we address her medical needs, her counseling needs? How do we look at her social welfare? And then how do we look at the community and try and educate and raise awareness in the community in response to the issues that she's dealing with? The women here today are all WARIF women. They're all proud, brave, strong women. Women that have stories, personal stories to share, but women that have gone through and come out at the other end and are stronger for it, and are sitting here to tell you that there is strength after adversity.
My name is Nzubechukwu Winifred Alexis Ekwone, and I am a writer and entrepreneur. So having gone through a series of, sexual violence and domestic violence, I lived my life in isolation and the feeling of rejection from the society, and I felt that as a black woman especially, that I was unwanted because of my story, and because I didn't really have any person or persons trying to be a voice for me or trying to care for me. I decided to do something. So last year, I decided to shoot a short film called Echefula. Echefula is a short film that tries to address the issue of sexual and domestic violence, and it's not just for the women. I was trying to address the issue as a societal problem, not as a gender problem.
I know the effects of what happened. I understand it at this point in my life now. When I look back, I can see this is the effect of abuse. This is the effect of being raped. And I decided that I wanted to do something else. So every time I got called up to say, can we talk about this thing? I'm like, yeah. But it really started when I decided that I was going to do a play. First of all, I had seen it being produced, and I felt like I needed to do something with it. The material called out to me, but I was really mad. And I was angry, and the anger was inexplicable. I didn't understand it. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to do this play again. And this time around, I'm going to advocate with it. And so immediately after the play, for the first time, I spoke publicly about my assault. I spoke about a part of it. And the women in the play, a lot of them have been through the same. And so people couldn't believe that survivors of rape could even come together and put something together. It was amazing to them, and it made people talk. And that was it. For me, the spark, the stories in that room, in a theater, where perfect strangers were. They were all telling their own stories. People were standing up and saying, oh, this happened to me, I don't know what to do about it, and all of that. And a mutual friend, a mutual mentor, somebody who I call a mentor, who is a friend to Dr. Kemi, said we should meet up. And that's how we met. And honestly, using Dr. Kemi for me was like a changing point for me, because she validated my feelings. She helped me to validate those feelings. She helped me to see that I still needed some care. I still needed some attention. And I can't tell you the impact that WARIF has had in its 4 years that it's been here. It feels like they've been around forever. And that's because of her indefatigable energy. I don't know where she gets it from, but she's on it and she means it. And for the first time, I've met someone who genuinely wanted to help. It wasn't for the accolades, it wasn't for the clouds, it wasn't for any flowers. She's doing the work because she wants to make the impact, and she's impacted me. I'm grateful that my husband supports me. I'm so grateful that he was able to have compassion for the situation and not use it against me. And not say, oh, this is what it is and all of that. However, I just feel like even though society is not it doesn't have the best reaction, to sexual assault, I feel like stories like this and stories and women like us, we'll be able to encourage other people who can't talk, who don't have any support, who don't know anybody. And the good thing is that WARIF has like a helpline, so anonymously you can even call. You don't even have to tell them my name. You don't have to say your name. Just call them and say, look, this happened to me. What do I do? And you start from there.
As Brenda rightly said, when we talk numbers and we put statistics down, imagine when you say 1 in 4 women would have a violent sexual encounter before age 18. And then you put that woman in a country of 200 million people, where half of us are women. And then we're a young country. So 64% of us are under the age of 24. That's over 10,000 women every day, 7 days a week, that are being sexually abused in Nigeria today.
My name is Dolapo and I work in the development space. So my story wasn't known until 2018. This was me, somebody who was abused at age 6, age 13, went on for a whole year and then continued. For the first time, 2018, I told my story and Twitter came for me. Twitter came for me because some people were like, is it just you? Why would you be raped when you were 6 and then you were raped when you were 13? No, you must have enjoyed it when you were 13 going to 14. Because
the survivor shaming is real.
Survivor shaming. And then some people reached out to me and they were like, oh my God, was that what happened to you when you were in school? Oh, we noticed your grades dropped. Oh, we actually just thought to know you really like boys, and then you were labeled like the school whore. It was a mix of emotions. It was terrible, and I initially blamed myself for putting my story out there, but later I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's fine. Anybody can say whatever they want to say. But then some people reached out to me and they were so apologetic.
Children that are groomed from childhood and socialized in homes and violent homes like that, unfortunately don't have the coping skills to deal with the violence, and so they internalize it, and therefore they become ostracized, and then they become separate from the group. And as they get older, predators, be it that young man, that young school teacher, that lecturer, identify those young girls. And therefore the cycle repeats itself. And this is where we come in. Because if we'd met Dolapo, if we'd met Brenda, if we'd met Winifred as children and gave them that right attention that they needed, that age-appropriate counseling, that validation that this was not their fault. Because we're living in an environment that's not enabling. I mean, the rape culture is real. Dolapo will be blamed. Brenda is wayward. Winifred shouldn't have gone out in the evening. It's never about the rapist. It's always about the survivor and what action or what they did to put themselves in that position to be raped. And this is where I find it so offensive, and this is why it's so important that we speak out. Everyone should live in a society free of rape and sexual violence.
So the first time it happened, I was 6. And then I told my grandmother what had happened, but then she said, do not tell anybody, because if you should tell somebody and then this gets out to the public, this family is going to be put to shame. And then I kept it for so many years. I couldn't even tell my mom then because my mom was working in a bank, so I know the work hours were not friendly. And she said, not even your mom, do not tell anybody about this because it's going to bring shame upon the family. And what were you looking for in the first place? So, and that was it for me. And the second time it happened, the same person said, do not tell anybody. Because if you tell somebody, nobody's going to believe you. And then I remembered what my grandmother had said. Okay, and then I said, okay, fine, perhaps this is how we should be. But looking back now, I feel I should have said something. I should have told someone. But now I did tell someone.
You were a child.
Yeah,
you told the wrong person.
I did tell someone, and she was a friend of mine in secondary school. But now I do not blame her because I feel like we were young. We were just 13 going to 14. So perhaps she couldn't comprehend what I told her. And I told her, I said, I was raped yesterday. And then she just looked at me and she laughed over it. And it was a whole lot of resentment that I had for her, and I kept it bottled. And then the following day was the first time I attempted suicide in my life. The following day after I had told her I attempted suicide because I felt even my best friend couldn't even believe me. She couldn't understand what I was going through. So I'm telling the 6-year-old version of Dolapo, I'm telling the 13-year-old version of Dolapo, speak, shout, Tell everybody who cares to listen that something has happened, because you will never know who will be out there to help you. Bottling up, silence, it fuels evil. Because imagine if I had said something, it wouldn't have continued, because I found out later that the person who had abused me when I was 13 continued with other teenagers. So if I had said something, if I had shouted to the church, if I had told somebody, perhaps, yes, he would have been brought to justice. But of course, we need to speak, because silence spells evil.
Yeah,
we can't let it continue.
Indeed. The first thing I want to say to Dolapo, and she knows this, is that Dolapo was a child speaking to another child.
Yeah.
And sadly, that was because she wasn't, and still isn't, in an enabling environment where she can speak to the right adult, where she felt safe enough and she was able to entrust that adult with her story. She was able to share that story. You're absolutely right. We spend more time dealing with the facade of our family name, hiding behind the stigmatization and the bias of rape and sexual violence, as opposed to addressing the issue and thereby allowing the young child to get the care that they need. Your grandmother, I'm sure she had her reasons, but because she made you stay silent, Dolapo didn't get the care she needed.
So just like Dolapo, it happened when I was 7, it happened when I was 18, and it happened again when I was 20. And this thing about silence that she said fuels evil, that's what it is. You see, the moment you say, this is what happened to me, and you keep insisting on saying that this is what happened to me, no, this is what happened to me, this is what happened to me, you're going to eventually find somebody to say, your feelings are valid. You understand? For me, the biggest thing for me was the guilt. I carried the guilt around. And as a young child, I'm just trying to imagine how I always felt like a dirty person. How I went around thinking I was a terrible person. How even if somebody liked me, even if a guy liked me, I would be like, look, I'm not a good person. I'm not a good person. I would berate myself. You know, I would reduce myself. You understand? To say, look, I'm not a good person. There's nothing you can get. Nothing. You understand? You know, how, you know, sex was, there was no value to sex.
There you
there was
go.
no value.
Yeah.
You know, it was a transactional thing. As far as I'm concerned, that's what everybody wanted. You know, so it's either I was in for it or I wasn't. You understand? I put up so many mechanisms. You know, at work, I would be very cold to everybody. You know, because I'm like, I don't want anybody to talk to me anyhow. I don't want anybody to think that I'm easy. I don't want anybody to think that I'm wayward. You know, so carrying around all these complexes and all these insecurities, and they were affecting my decisions. It is not your fault, and that is what I would tell the young person in me looking at me today. It is not your fault, you didn't cause it. Tell somebody today. Keep shouting, keep screaming, keep talking about it. Don't let anybody silence you. Don't let anybody tell you that what you're saying is wrong, it's false, it's shameful. It is not. You will always find somebody to support you. Just keep talking.
As a woman, sometimes I sit down and I ask myself, is it that there is something that I'm doing that is making these experiences like come to me? How do you see a child of 5 and you want to hurt that child? You see a child of 10 that is just growing and you feel like it's her body that is calling you. And then you have parents, you have people that you think should protect you.
Right.
And they do otherwise. I went to a Catholic school, and when my last experience in 2014 happened, I was about 17, 18. This happened 2 weeks after I graduated from secondary school, and I didn't know them. It was a gang situation. And you know, I went to the hospital, to the church, and the priest who was my spiritual director then, you know, sent someone to take me to the church clinic. They did whatever test they needed to run. They said they didn't find anything. So they thought it was like a vaginal tear or something, not knowing that it was anal. And at that point, when it got to my mom, all she said was like, may I so rest in peace. All she said was she had gone to go and have sex with some guy, and because she was scared of, you know, getting pregnant, she decided to pull the I was raped, you know, string. I couldn't walk properly. My neck was like strained because of the entire violence and everything. I still took that limping. I took it to go write my apostille MA. In my mind, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to shut this down. I'm going to go to school. and I do not want to ever talk about this again. And then you keep growing with this guilt. You keep growing with this malfunctioning. Because now, all I ever saw myself was a sexual object that is just there to be abused. So if a man approached me today and he's like, "Oh, fine girl," I'm like, "Sir, calm down. You need to be coming up. What do you want? Do you want to have sex? Okay, fine."
We spoke about this.
Yeah. If I'm if I'm alone with a guy and he starts touching me and I'm like, "Don't touch me. I do not want it," and he's like, I'm like, "Okay, just take and go."
If
Why?
You break down a woman's self-esteem to the point where her exchange, any physical interaction, is based on sex, and the exchange of sex is usually with someone that has that power dynamic, an older party, or someone that unfortunately has been given authority over you, perhaps a teacher, perhaps a pastor, perhaps your father, perhaps a caregiver. Then unfortunately what happens over time is that messaging is over and over.
Registered.
Exactly. And it gets to a point where you start to believe in the message. I say it all the time, there's only one reason alone, a rapist.
So our stories are similar in such a way that, sex became the rebound.
Yeah.
And, we would...
Trauma bound.
Yeah, trauma bound. We had already created alter egos for ourselves. So eventually when we are in that
it's only because you put that, and then you have your control back.
Exactly.
You take your control back.
So we feel like
you
we're
dictate the
in
terms.
control. Yeah.
I decide I'm going to have sex with this gentleman.
Exactly.
I am in control of this situation because I've dictated the terms.
Exactly. So it was a way of we taking our powers back, and we had already created alter egos for ourselves. Like me, I did not create an alter ego for myself until I got into therapy at WARIF.
Besides the fact that, as I said, it's a problem that has become a pandemic. I mean, it's now been recognized finally as a national crisis. The truth is, I think why we are so effective because we are totally survivor-centered. We put the survivor front and center. Everything that we do is to address all the needs of the survivor. A survivor is physically assaulted. She needs medical attention. She needs forensic medical examination in a timely fashion because she might decide to seek justice. And so she would need that DNA specimen. She needs to have tests carried out. She might have HIV because unfortunately the perpetrator may have attacked her unprotected. She might need medication because she might have contracted a sexually transmitted disease. She has a mental trauma, the emotional trauma. She needs counseling. And she needs the counselor to walk her through the event, not just on that day, but until a time comes where she delivers herself with help and she pushes through. Everyone's time is different. There's no right or wrong time. It might take Dolapo 10 years. It might take Brenda 5. But we need to have that consistent attention. Then her welfare, her social welfare. What's happening with her living conditions?
For me, the guilt, it took forever. And when I slip up sometimes, when I find myself in a situation where, the thing that happened on Twitter the last few months, I was so triggered. It was just a hard time for me because there was a lot of disbelief, the survivor was being shamed, there was a lot of things going on. And I slipped back into victim mentality. You understand? And I was so mad. And I felt like I lost my voice because I couldn't even speak. I couldn't talk. My usual active advocacy self, I just went away. As in, I didn't even want to see social media. You understand? Dr. K called me, and I just remembered who I am. I remembered that this is not true, and so I put out a post talking about the survivor and how nobody should gaslight anybody here, and everybody should be okay. And then I put out a post indicting comedians. That's where, and that went viral, and so I did those two things at least in the little strength that I could muster.
We live in a patriarchy. We know that. Women are subjugated even when they're not sexually abused. Women are considered second-class citizens in our country. Women, when you look at the different industries, are never given the same equal standing. And so therefore, we're dealing with a much larger picture than just sexual violence. We're dealing with basic gender inequality. And then we have the added concerns of our traditional norms and practices.
Exactly.
We're strong, brave, wonderful groups of different ethnic groups. And we come with wonderful, rich culture. But unfortunately, we do have harmful practices. The harmful practice that tells a man that it's okay to beat his wife. The harmful practice that tells that mother-in-law that it's okay for her to now what? Physically admonish the young girl.
Virginity test.
The virginity test that young girls are made to endure. How about the female genital mutilation that still happens every day?
Yes.
Unfortunately, we're living in a society where, yes, this culture has become systemic. And so therefore, everybody that is dealing with different forms of violence has to face those social biases and that stigmatization. It's alive and well every day.
You know, there's a practice, you know, we're moralistic and religious in Nigeria. It's a challenge because there's a practice about keeping yourself chaste, you know, and associating sex as a bad thing. You understand? Where, of course, it's sex was created for many reasons, you know, but nobody's educating the young girl about her body.
Because we realized at WARIF that no, young girls and boys were not being educated in mainstream school curricula, is why we designed and implemented programs. So we take our educational programs to that formative age, that 12 to 16-year-old. And we had to do it in two separate gender formats. Because with a girl child, the focus is different. You're teaching her to protect herself. You're teaching her to identify the groomer. You're teaching her the information that she needs to have handy to avoid the situation. But with a boy child, you're teaching him not to become that potential perpetrator. Because he's living in an environment where he's socialized into thinking that it's an entitled right of his to take. And so therefore you have to change his narrative.
It still goes down to what she said. Traditionally, I was telling her, it's one thing for you to be a woman. It's another thing for you to be a black woman. It's another thing for you to be a Nigerian black woman. And then it's worse if you're a Nigerian black woman that has been abused or facing any form of, abuse. Because now you go, personal as a woman, I cannot count my struggles. You go from sexual struggle, you go down to your identity as a woman, how the society has painted you to be. You say you want to consent into having sex with a man, and you're trying to teach this man how to touch you. He picks an offense. That entitlement, because he sees you as, I'm just going to have sex with you and then you go. He doesn't care if you're fine. He doesn't care. You're telling him, oh, you're hurting me. He doesn't listen to you. And I'm like, you all come and say, oh, women are this. What these women try? They say women don't tell them anything. The ones who tell you, the ones who try to teach you, what have you done about it?
Educating young children, educating middle-aged children, teenagers about how they feel, what they're feeling at the time that they're feeling it. And I don't know how this revolution is going to happen.
Parenting.
Yes.
Let's start with that.
Yes.
How do you bring up your boy child versus your girl child?
We need to break.
Why is it that, why is it okay for
you
you to now validate your boy child and his bad behavior because he's a young son?
Yes.
And then with your girl child, she's less, if you will, important enough to be given the due attention. My son is being raised to understand that you don't get a free pass because you're a boy. You know what I mean? You don't. You have to raise your children equally. Otherwise, you're going to raise entitled young men.
Yes.
Yeah. And once you pass that formative age, we're formed.
Yes. I'm just going to say this. I think that sexual assault and gender-based violence is wrong. I'm so glad that a few of the states in Nigeria have started to recognize this and are working towards, legislation that will help prosecute these people. But before this happens, we need to support the people who have been working in the front lines against this. WARIF is one of them. I'm sure you can see the information. You need to support them wholly. You need to get educated, and this is for everybody. Look, the information is out there online. There are pamphlets, there are sheets, there are a lot of people that are doing programs that are around, ending sexual violence and sexual and gender-based violence. And please take some time out. Watch this interview. Listen to everything that we've said. Do you understand? For parents, you need to develop a relationship with your kids. You need to develop a relationship with your kids. You may not, have all the advice in the world. You may not have all the knowledge in the world. But when you develop a relationship with your children, then they'll be able to tell you what's going on. You'll be able to know if somebody is grooming them, if they're on their way, if they understand who they are, what their identity is. You need to stop distinguishing between your male children and your female children. Every child is the same. Treat them the same. The same values. If your daughter is learning to cook, your son should learn to cook. If your daughter is cleaning, your son should clean. It's the same thing. And give your daughters the same opportunities that your son has.
Absolutely.
So what I'm just going to say is, in our world today, we are in a situation where this is now a pandemic. You understand? 1 in 4 women in Nigeria. And that means that if you count 4 girls in your class, the 4th one has probably been assaulted. That's what it means. Bring it close to home and understand that you need to do something about it today.
Well, for me, I would say first, silence spells evil. To victims out there, you need to speak. Because when you do not speak, then we cannot bring the perpetrators to justice. And to the perpetrators, it's about time that the government should start thinking of rehabilitation processes. Because sentencing them to jail, they facing a jail term, they come back. They go back into the society and then they repeat the cycle all over again. Let's invest in rehabilitation processes, rehabilitation programs. To parents, we need to break toxic masculinity. It starts from the house. These boys who grew up to become men do not just jump to become men, they start off as boys. So we need to break off and curb up bad habits. You do not enable toxic masculinity, because who knows who your son is going to do it to. And then to parents also, we need to listen, we need to watch. I have an 11-year-old, he's a boy, but I watch and I listen. Everything he has to say, I listen. When he catches feelings in class, it tells me. Yes, you need to listen, and you need to have some very deep conversations with your children, because they know a whole lot more than you.
Absolutely.
I had my boys schooling me, telling me, about sex, about consent, and I said, oh, good for you, yeah, let me teach you a couple of things more. That is how it should be. Parenting now is not the old stereotype way which we were brought up. No, it's not going to work. So we need to watch, we need to listen, we need to be our children's best friends.
For me, what I would want to, my advice to everybody, especially parents, normalize having sexual talks with your kids. It's very important. And to mothers, do not go about telling your daughters, oh, don't let anybody touch your mango. Call the names of these body parts. Call vagina. Call it breast. Because we've lived in a world where everything is like overly too sexualized. We want to use slang. Don't use slang. There are biological names for this. In the same way you have your ear, your eye, your nose. Say, do not let a man touch your breast at this age. Your vagina, your buttocks. Normalize saying this. Say your penis. Because when you start giving them slangs, these kids they have a vague idea as to what they should actually look at when they're actually having these conversations or they're having these experiences outside. Because your kids are going to go out and they say, and you start hearing mommy saying nobody should touch my mango. What is mango? Call it breast, please. And not just with your daughters, with your sons, to teach them consent, teach them how to respect women. Because if they don't respect women, they can't get that same respect back. And if they think that the idea of entitlement is going to work for them, to be honest, you're actually putting them in danger. Because we have thousands of, I've met a lot of men, and I promise you, their ways of thinking is like fractured. We're all products of our homes, and because we're all products of our homes, we actually make up society. Then we should also learn to accept therapy. Therapy is not a bad thing. I tell people freely, oh yeah, I'm going through therapy, and they'll be like, therapy is not a bad thing. I feel everybody should go for therapy. Yes. As a parent, you should go for therapy because it's a generational and secular thing. It has been running through generations, and we need to start breaking those circuits. We need to start breaking those lineage of countless of abuse and emotional damages, because if we don't, generations are going to come after us and we still keep talking about this issue. So please, you're not too old, you're not too young to go for therapy. Therapy helps you become aware of even situations that you did not even know you actually had. So normalize having sexual talks with your kids, normalize going for therapy, encourage your kids to like you said, let your kids tell you things, because if they don't tell you, you wouldn't know, and you wouldn't know how to help them. And it's not just letting them tell you stuff. Have an open mind.
Yeah.
Because I see some parents, their kids come to tell them stuff and they shut them out completely. When you do that, your kids will be forced to go tell a stranger that might even hurt them. So please, parents, you have a whole lot to do. And for the government, please, you cannot keep putting a blindfold to rape cases that are rising. The legal system, we need to put them in check. The police, we need to start asking a lot of questions and making sure that they're actually doing their job, sensitizing them on how to handle these issues too. And for the general public, if somebody confides in you and tells you that they've been abused, male or female, you owe your next person that responsibility to care for them, because it can happen to anybody. And if you don't care for them, they can pose as a problem to not just you, to the next person, and it will continue like that.
The fight against gender-based violence is a collective one, and we all have a role to play. We've discussed the role of the parent, we've discussed the need to bring up our children equally, we've discussed the role of the community, the survivor shaming that we hear. We need to allow the community to be an enabling one. We need to allow survivors the ability, the strength to come forward and speak out against these acts of violence. We need to look at the government, as Winifred rightly said. We need to look at our laws, our outdated laws. We need to amend. We need to implement the laws that we have. We need our legal system updated, if you will. We need to include gender-based violence as an essential service. We need to have more medical facilities. Lagos is a city of 22 million people. We only have 2 recognized sexual assault referral centers. We need to ensure that shelters are available so women can leave their homes of abuse and find safety. We need to look at the law enforcement. We need to sensitize them. WARIF had a police sensitization program just for that. We trained over 800 police officers, recognizing that they need to be sensitized to deal with these issues of violence. And to the survivors, we need to reassure them that they have a safe space, that it is not their fault, and that we believe them. Organizations like WARIF are available. We have 24-hour confidential helplines. We have health centers like the Rape Crisis Center in Yaba. And we have people available 24/7 that are willing to hear you, believe you, and address your needs. I would like to thank my wonderful WARIF women for everything that not only have they been through, but to find the strength, the tenacity, and the resilience to, in spite of it all, come through it at the other end, be brave, beautiful women, and then giving each and every one of us the privilege to hear your story and to learn from it.